Now, up until the last couple of years, the most popular index used for these hybrid ARMs was what we called LIBOR, London Interbank Offer Rate. And I won't get into the details of how did that become the index, because for one thing, you're getting a mortgage in the U.S. and it's an ARM loan and it's tied to some rate in London. What does that mean? Anyway, we won't get into all that. But the point is that was the most popular index for years after the Great Recession and with the advent of these new hybrid ARMs. But then you take that rate and you have to add a margin to it. Think of the margin as sort of like a profit margin. And the typical margin would be somewhere between 2.25 and 2.25 and 2.75%. That would be added to the margin. So on these hybrid ARMs, the initial start rate for the fixed period would be roughly equivalent to that formula, index plus margin, but usually discount a little bit below that result. So in other words, if you take your index plus margin and it's 6%, they might take that start rate for 5 years and place it at 5.5. So that's why it would be better than a 30-year fixed rate loan. But then what you had to know is after that 5 years, your loan's going to adjust every 12 months and adjust according to the index at that time plus the margin. So that is basically how they worked. And what we're running into and why it's in the news now, and in fact, I saw an article by CNN talking about thousands of homeowners are facing resets of their ARM loans and are facing big increases in their monthly payment. Well, what the heck why would that happen? I mean, because you would think that most of those folks, when they got this kind of loan, intended to not keep it past the fixed period. At least that was the logic in most cases. Well, what's happened here is a couple things. Again, 5, 7, and 10 years. So if you think about it, folks who got one of these hybrid ARMs in 2014, some of these folks who got this hybrid ARM in 2017, a 7-year ARM, those who got a 5-year ARM in 2019, they're now facing potentially or upcoming, or maybe it's just occurred, their first adjustment after the fixed period. And so then you wonder, and I think a lot of these homeowners maybe even forgot, well, what happens when that adjustment occurs? Are you just wide open? Are you just exposed to whatever the rate is at that time and you're going to be having to deal with that? Well, no. All of these did have caps, okay? They had both an adjustment cap and a life cap. The adjustment cap would be, of course, as the label implies, would be the cap on that formula, index plus margin. There'd be a cap to that. So if there is an increase because of that formula, it would be capped. And typically an adjustment cap would be 2%. But during this period, many of these had caps that were not what we call 225. That's the better scenario. 2% adjustment cap at the first adjustment, like in year 6, year 8, or year 11. Then a subsequent 2% cap for each 12-month adjustment after that. And then a 5% life cap. So if you started at 5.5 for 5 years, your life cap over the life of the loan would be no higher than 10.5. And if you had an adjustment cap the first year of adjustment at 2%, you could see an increase in your payment, in your rate of 2%, even if the index plus margin called for a rate higher than that. If the index plus margin called for the rate increase to be 3%, you'd be protected at 2%. So at least would kind of soften the blow of that increase. Unfortunately, a lot of these ARMs that were made had what we call 5-to-5 caps. What that means, and why would there be 5-to-5 caps? Well, frankly, that's better for the lender. It allowed the lender to price that loan more aggressively. For originators, it often would allow for them to earn a higher income by offering a 5-to-5 cap instead of a 2-to-5 cap. And the problem with that is, as you might imagine, think of it this way. You start let's say you got a 5-year ARM in 2019 with a 5-to-5 cap structure. When that first adjustment in year 6, if the index has gone up quite a bit, and then you add your margin of 2.25 to 2.75, And if that increase is 6% over what you started at, you're going to be exposed to a 5% increase over your start rate.
Wow.
And in fact, what's interesting is in this CNN article I read, one of the people they profiled was a lady who actually was a loan officer. And she's claimed that she experienced a $2,000 a month increase in her monthly payment as a result of the first adjustment cap. Now, it didn't get into the detail of what kind of cap she had. I would venture to guess that she had a 5% first adjustment cap. Now, what was kind of interesting about it, the article, is she basically admitted in being interviewed that she thought she had gotten herself a 10-1 arm, and then was surprised to learn that no, she had gotten a 7-1 arm, and she had forgotten about that. So the first adjustment, when it occurred, totally shocked her because she thought it wasn't going to happen for 3 more years, and she ended up having this adjustment occur after year 7, and I'm pretty sure she must have had a 5% cap because of that kind of increase in payment. That's huge, right? So that's the watch out for, because one of the problems with ARM loans is, particularly with these hybrid ARMs, is a lot of times these homeowners, they don't remember what they got. They may not even remember when the first adjustment is, and they could end up being a surprise. Now, they end up getting a warning, well in advance, a couple of months in advance by the lender. But still, what I'm concerned about, and what I think the CNN article is talking about in terms of all these thousands of homeowners facing these significant resets, is how many of those people had a 5% first adjustment cap, and they're in for a big, big surprise if that occurs. But frankly, even a 2% increase can be pretty substantial in payment. And so what's unfortunate is anybody who had a 5-year that they got in 2019, a 7-year that they got in 2017, a 10-year that they got in 2014, you think to yourself, why the heck didn't they refi in 2020 and 2021, the 2s and 3s? Because at those kind of fixed rates, they would have avoided the resets altogether. And yet there's thousands of homeowners who, for whatever reason, didn't do that, still have the house, still have the loan, and now they're faced with these resets, and it can be financially a big, big hit to them.
What's the recourse, and what's something that people can do? Like I know now, let's go back to that, where let's say it was 2019. What kind of rates did we have back then?
Well, even then they were pretty good. I mean, they weren't as low as we had in 20 and 21, but in 2019, you're talking, we might have even touched high 3s, but it was certainly in the 4s. And with these ARM loans, again, I'm a little bit puzzled why anybody who had one of these, let's put it this way. In 2019, yeah, I mean, we could get fixed rates in the 4s, but some of these intermediate hybrid ARMs, you could get a start rate that might be in 3s or 3.5. So that still was a benefit to forego that reasonably good 30-year fixed rate and go with the ARM loan, again, with the thinking that you weren't going to keep it past the fixed period. And yet, for some reason, a lot of these homeowners, I think, ended up just not taking advantage of that refi window in the last 2 or 3 years ago, and now are finding out that, in fact, they're going to be hit with a much, much higher rate.
What do you think that's going to do to, we've talked in past, and we've talked about inventory levels, and inventory levels were tight, which kept the prices high and whatnot, and selection low. What do you think this is going to do? Is it going to force some of these homeowners that have this huge jump, like $2,000 a month? And we already know, we read it all the time, of people living paycheck to paycheck. Where are they going to find that extra $2,000? Is it going to force them to walk away from that mortgage and become a renter, and that becomes something that's an inventory for the next person to come in?
Well, that certainly could be, depending on their ability to qualify for a mortgage now. To me, the more obvious solution or option, if they're faced with this, either because it's already occurred or because it's coming, because they're nearing the end of their fixed period, is to look at refinancing. Yes, even at our current rate levels in the 6s. I mean, for example, going back to many of these loans, at least until a couple of years ago, were tied to the LIBOR index. Well, the LIBOR index right now is in the mid 5s.
Wow.
And if you're looking at a margin that's in the twos, now I would argue a lot of those ARM loans weren't made at a 2.25 margin. They were made at a 2.75 margin. Again, why? Because it did benefit the lender and the originator more in terms of income. In fact, some of them even had a 3% margin. Well, consider if you've got a 7-year ARM that you got in 2017 and it's tied to LIBOR, and you have a 2.75 or 3% margin, you're going to be adjusting to a rate that's going to be high 8s, maybe even approaching 9%.
Wow.
Well, then if that's the case, refinancing into a 30-year fix at 6.5 doesn't look so bad. The refi market lately has been, dead for a couple of years. There's very few refis going on, certainly in terms of for reducing your rate. But the ARM borrower, the borrower who's got these ARMs, either has already reset and they're facing these much higher payments, or they're about to reset in the next few months. I would argue those homeowners, they need to go through their file cabinet, find their ARM loan note, and remind themselves of how it's structured, and try to anticipate what that first adjustment's going to be. And then if it is going to be something that's going to be 8.5, 8.75, 8 7/8, they ought to be calling somebody like us and have us help them, refinance that loan before it resets. In fact, I would argue anybody listening to this program, if you know anyone who has a hybrid ARM, they got it, 5, 7, 10 years ago, and they are aware that it's about to adjust soon, they ought to take a look at their loan documents, or, if they can get them, they're happy to send us a copy, and we can kind of decipher for them what exactly is going to happen to that loan when that first adjustment occurs, so that we can at least inform them, here's what your rate's going to be, at least based on where the index value is now. Maybe you're not going to adjust until November, but we'll have a pretty good idea now what it's going to adjust to based on the LIBOR value. And then, give them some options in terms of refinancing into a fixed rate to avoid that adjustment when it occurs.
So it sounds like to me, and stop me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me, based on those people who were 5, 7 years ago, that what you can offer them today to refinance out of is truly a lower rate than what they'll be facing if they said, hey, I'm just gonna go into that fixed rate or the adjustable rate portion and deal with it. You're better off right now getting a hold of you and saying, hey, help me out.
Right, exactly. I'm talking to a homeowner now. I sent her a worksheet last week where they had a 10-year ARM, and for whatever reason, they kept it. Well, they thought, well, we got a great loan. I mean, it's in the, it's 3%. Kind of like everybody's got the 3% mortgages now, except the difference is they're fixed rate loans. So they thought, I talked to her about it. I was like, well, did you ever think about refinancing out of this loan earlier? And they said, well, no, we had a great rate. It's 3%. And we just didn't give it much thought. Well, now they're giving it thought. Why? Because the adjustments happened, and they're no longer that, and they had the 5% first adjustment cap.
Oh.
So as a consequence, they are, I think she said, 8 3/8. Not that long ago, everyone was talking about mortgage rates were in the 8s, right? We never got that high. We never got past low mid 7s. But now that they've adjusted to 8 3/8, I've sent her numbers on a worksheet last week where I can get her something in the mid 6s. That's a 2% reduction over what they've adjusted to now. So that's an obvious option that they need to pursue to refinance that loan, because who knows when that thing's going to start to come back down. So there's a lot of those scenarios out there. People who got these loans, they don't remember even fully what they got. They're not paying attention to when that first adjustment's going to occur. So I'm urging anybody I'm talking to who has an ARM loan, be strategic. If you haven't had your adjustments occurring yet, you really ought to take a look at your loan documents, give us a copy. We'll help you decipher them and figure out if they should be strategic and take action to get rid of that loan, refinance, even at current rates. If we help them determine that the current index plus the margin is going to blow past current rates, we can help them get a refi locked in where we're at now. And then, of course, if rates fall in the next couple of years, we can refinance them again if we get back in the 5s or 4s and that kind of thing. So,
wow. Well, Art, the little thing we had on the screen there, that is a time bomb that has a pretty short fuse on it, sounds like. I put your information on there, 760-969-5023, or you can call Art on his cell at 714-612-9035. That may be worth the bat call at 714-612-9035 to get a hold of Art, because I can't, as you said, if, think about this. If your mortgage went up $2,000 a month starting next month, what would that do to you? Avoid the stress, call Art. And Art, any last thoughts before we let you go on this topic? This was very enlightening, and wow.
Well, no, like I said, if anyone listening, if they have an ARM loan themselves, or if they know someone who has an ARM loan, and again, if they've had one for several years, then they really ought to look at their loan documents, figure out what they got. We can help you with that, and determine if you should take action now to avoid those resets, avoid that first adjustment. Now, if you just got an ARM loan a year ago or 2 years ago, no need to panic. It probably makes sense to hang on to it for now, because that fixed period's not over yet. And of course, there's this expectation that mortgage rates are going to settle down. Again, they're not going to go back to 2s and 3s, folks. But I think 5s are in the future, maybe even 4s. So if you've got a 5-year or 7-year that you just got a couple of years ago, no need to panic. Probably makes sense to keep it, at least until fixed rate levels get down to those 5s or 4s, and then do the refi then. But anyone facing an upcoming adjustment, or just had one and they're like trying to pick themselves up off the floor after, curling up like a baby crying about the increase in their payment, we can help. Give us a call and we'll help you figure out what your options are.
Art, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's, if you need some help, give Art a call at 760-969-5023, or his cell at 714-612-9035. That's MortgageWorks. Art, thank you so much. I'll turn the show back over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.